Welcome back to Big Ideas Made Simple. I'm Jess Weber, and this is the show for people who are highly capable, full of ideas, and somehow still feeling a little maxed out. So, last week I talked about this concept of being mislabeled and about what happens when someone who is wired to think across many domains or who connects things that others don't naturally connect, or even who operates at a level of range that most systems weren't built for gets handed the wrong diagnosis. And what we landed on was it doesn't mean that they are scattered or unfocused. It truly just means that there has been a mislabeling. And so I want to go a little bit deeper on this because here's what happens when you name that. When you finally see what has been constant across every role, every room, every version of your working life, you still might not move. And that's not because your clarity isn't real, but because you've been doing everything for so long that you stop questioning whether or not you were supposed to be doing it. And that's the space that I want to spend a little bit of time on today, because I don't believe that you are supposed to do it all. And I want to talk about why that is structural, not personal, and what we should actually do about it. So let's go back a little bit. I've talked about a few of these events in different episodes before, but what's important here is the sequence, the order of operations lined up like dominoes. And each thing impacts how I showed up in the next, which is why I want to talk about the decisions behind those as well. So, first event that I'm thinking of is when Thomas had one of his first SVT episodes when he was about a year and a half old and had sudden onset cardiac arrhythmia with a heartbeat of 300. I spent a week in the hospital with him. And if you've ever sat in the hospital with a loved one and tried to hold everything else outside of the hospital together at the same time, you know what it felt like. I was trying to be present in that room while juggling everything else and making sure that the world didn't collapse while I was stuck sitting inside a room. And so when Thomas came home stable, all the things, and I went back to my professional world, I asked for what I felt like I needed in the moment. Just a singular accommodation that would let me show up for his ongoing cardiac care. And what I felt like I had requested was extremely reasonable. It wasn't about capacity or ability. It was truly a slight shift in my schedule. And it just was what I needed to make everything keep working. But what I didn't expect was that the answer was no. And so, just like that, a role that I'd held on to for years, one that had been a core part of how I saw myself professionally, was gone in an instant. Not on my terms, not by my choice. And that loss is what led me to make the decision to build a business with three other partners. So, Leverage Strong was founded by three incredible humans inside Keller Williams, but I came on and built basically the entirety of the program and the offer and everything in several weeks with real stakes, timeline, build, because I felt like it was the right time to do it, and I had the capacity to do it when everything else shut down. The funny part about it was we were also moving houses. So we had family friends who had, decided to sell off market in the neighborhood that we had been dying to get into, and it was too good to pass up kind of thing. And so we moved, and in the midst of all of this, uncertainty and lack of security and stability, my husband Forrest came to me and said, "Hey, I have this idea," because he had been with Edward Jones for years and loved his team, his work, the structure, the predictability, the benefits, everything, right? And so he said, "Hey, since you've lost this role and the new business, while you've launched it and built it really well, is not meeting our financial needs, why don't you look at this open position at Edward Jones in our department?" And so, he was offering that stability and that control in the midst of chaos. And at that same time, within probably 24 hours of that initial conversation, was when I was talking to my current partner at I Love Coaching, Adam Roach. And there was an opportunity that was just starting to manifest with him. But it was the complete opposite of everything at Edward Jones. It was freedom, flexibility, and the opportunity to keep building the things I'd already invested my time and energy in, like Leverage Strong. And so the choice was kind of laid out in front of me. And I had, a W-2 stable position, benefits, all the things in a known space that had already proven to be good for our family, and an entrepreneurial, flexible entity that offered some level of stability, but at the same time was still not the same as, being attached to a corporation. And so with those two things sitting on the table, I had one thing happen, and that's what this entire episode is about. I did not make a pro and con list. I asked myself one question. If I say yes to this, can I sustain it? Not endure it, not do it. Can I sustain it? Because for me, capability was never the question. I knew I could perform the Edward Jones version of myself because I had performed versions of myself in every structured container I'd ever been in. Those environments hand you a job description and the expectations, and that becomes the shape that you fill. And I am very good at molding myself and fitting into different shapes. But what I started to recognize in that moment was that leaving part of myself at the door was something that I didn't want to keep doing. And when I recognized that, it felt like the choice was obvious. And so here's what I need you to hear underneath all of this. The problem wasn't that I didn't know what I wanted. The problem was that for years before that moment, I had been doing everything so effectively that nobody, self included, had ever stopped to ask which parts of it were mine to carry. And so it's funny, thinking through all of those things as I prepared for this episode, I started going back to a book that I have read probably a half dozen times. And this is Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman and Mark Winters. And honestly, I believe it is one of the most underutilized frameworks available to anybody operating in a space of business, whether it's entrepreneurial or corporate. Most people recognize Rocket Fuel as the concept in the book attached through EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And when they hear it, they immediately think, oh, this is all about finding your integrator, hiring somebody, building a leadership team. And that was, I'm sure, the original intention of the book. But the premise underneath the framework is what I've attached to this episode, and I want you to hear it here. It applies to everybody, whether you have a team or not, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. And here's the premise. There are two really distinct operating roles inside business, and they require fundamentally different wiring. So Wickman and Winters call them the visionary and the integrator. And the visionary is the idea generator, the creator. They think big, they see around corners, they get energized by new directions or opportunities. They have many things they want to build, and all of them genuinely seem to add value to the overall goal. So think of the visionary as the person carrying the vision, right? And on the flip side, you have the integrator, which is the executor, the organizer, the person who follows through. So they take the vision and they translate it into an action plan that can actually happen. They create the systems and they hold the structure together while the visionary is three more ideas ahead of them. And so the book's core thesis is this: a visionary who tries to integrate will eventually probably break the business or themselves, because those two modes are so different. And running both simultaneously isn't a productivity problem. It's a structural problem. And so when most people who read the book get there, they think, oh, okay, well, I'm the one side. So if I'm an integrator, I need to go find a visionary I can be attached to. If I am a visionary, I need to go hire my integrator now. And I would say eventually yes to all of that. I want to name something that the book touches on briefly, but it doesn't fully address, because it's the thing that I think matters most to the people listening right now. There are probably some of you who will go take the crystallizer assessment, which is a free tool that names which side you are in, visionary or integrator, and what your score is in each. And it's like 40 questions, free on their website, and I'll link the assessment in the show notes. But here's what's funny is I would bet that a majority of the people that go take it, that are listeners of this podcast, score pretty high in both, and potentially even equally in both. And I say that because I'm one of them. So when I first read the book, before I'd taken the assessment, I kept catching myself saying, wait a minute, I do that, but I also do this. And it's funny because even in the book, they're like, if you think you're both, you're probably not, because there's very few that are. But the thing is if you are, it's not a sign that you're unbalanced or unclear or broken or anything. It's proof that you are highly capable, highly functional. You can create and generate a vision, but also a strategic plan to execute it. You can think big and also get stuff done. And here's the trap for people like us. When you score higher in both, nothing in the framework tells you which seat to choose. So most of the time, you don't choose either of them consciously. You honestly just keep running both. And it does work for a while. I mean, it'll give you novelty. It feels like you've got options right up until the point that it doesn't. So right up until that point that you're good at everything, but making progress on nothing, or your capacity has been spread so evenly across both sides that neither one is getting what it actually needs from you. And this is what I think that we need to talk about, because it's not just a me thing or a high scoring on both sides thing. The larger problem here is that most people, whether they're an obvious visionary or an obvious integrator or somebody who's kind of more in the middle, they've never been handed the framework to begin with. So they don't understand those two operating modes. They don't get that they've probably been running both inside the container they're currently in, and they don't even know that choosing a lane is an option. So the first step before any of this is just awareness. Where do you spend the majority of your energy? And which one lights you up inside? It makes you feel alive. If you had to pick, which one would you say you could get lost in and love for the rest of your life? Because that side, that's your seat. And so I think it's important that my friends who are maxed out, my high capacity people who get stuck, whether you're a solopreneur or part of that larger organization, I want to tell you this. Once you start narrowing your focus and you do become a specialist in something, you might find yourself saying, oh, that's not my department. And if you're the person who has that wide range of competency, you might not have ever gotten the chance to say that yet, right? Because you've demonstrated that you can handle anything and everything. And so there's an expectation that forms around you because you can do it, you've done it, you should keep doing it, all the things. And the most highly capable people in my experience are also the most wired to be useful. I know personally, I love seeing connections and solving problems and filling gaps. And saying no feels like failing or abandoning somebody or letting them down or admitting a limitation that I don't actually feel like I have. And so I don't say it. But that pattern over time, when you don't say no to some things, you become that person that holds everything, every function, every position, every gap. And because you're holding everything, nothing gets to your full capacity. So that work that lights you up inside, the thing that you probably are really truly put on this planet to do, is buried under 6 other job roles you're also running. And I want to say that because the productivity world won't say it for you. That right there is not a failure of discipline or a lack of focus. Truly, what this boils down to is a problem of structure. You might be a one-person business and you're running a 2-person operating system, and you're going to do it well, and you might do it for so long that you don't even notice the model's broken. But here's the thing that I need you to hear me say. It is completely fine to have multiple streams of income. It is not okay for you to have multiple streams of effort. The multiple streams of effort isn't always about income. Sometimes it's about operating roles. And when you're creating the vision and integrating something simultaneously and calling it hustle, and then you start feeling behind, even when you know that there is some level of momentum, that's what's happening. You're split. You are divided. And so when you can't step away and immediately hire out the other half of that to alleviate some of the stress because you're not there financially, or you're still in the building phase, or you're in a company that isn't about hiring at all, if you're still running both functions, it is okay. But here's the thing that I want to push you on today is there is a big difference between doing the integration work because it's necessary and doing it because you feel like you have to because you haven't ever named which seat really belongs to you. The first is a season. The second becomes an identity trap. Naming the seat doesn't make the work disappear, but it gives you a filter. So it changes the question from can I do this to does this pull me towards the seat that's mine or away from it? And over time, the question starts to shape the decisions. So what you take on versus what you hand off, what you stop gold plating in the wrong lane. For the person who is like me, the unicorn who scores equally in both, naming the seat requires a very different kind of honesty. It is not about which one has the better ROI right now. It's not which one am I even objectively better at. It's which one do I lose track of time in? And when I hand it off, even temporarily, I get relief versus low-grade anxiety about whether or not it's going to get done right. The way that you answer those questions is how you name your seat. So in my own situation, choosing I Love Coaching over Edward Jones wasn't about the benefits, the schedule, the package, the people, the location. It was about which seat the role required. And one asked me to execute inside somebody else's system. The other offered me the opportunity to build my own. One of those lanes was clearly mine, and the other was the container I'd already outgrown before I ever even walked through the door. So these are the three questions I actually ran in that pressure test situation. Not a journal or some strategy session, but in the middle of feeling like everything was on fire. They're questions that work when there's no time for anything more fancy. So question number one, I'll push you on. Is this sustainable, or am I just capable of short-term sustaining it? Capable means that you can hold it together. You have range, you're resilient, you probably make it through. But sustainable means that you can hold it together without depleting the thing that makes you the most effective at what you're actually built for. And if you answer capable but not sustainable, that's your signal that you're in the wrong seat. Question number two, what does this role require me to leave at the door? And is whatever that answer is actually an option? Every role asks you to do something. The question is whether it's asking you to set aside something peripheral or central. And if that role requires you to compress something of yourself that shows up consistently across every context and version of yourself, that part isn't optional. That's part of your thread. And if a role asks you to leave the thread at the door, then it's a container that wasn't built for you. So then it gets you to question three. Am I choosing this, or am I choosing it because it's the version of me someone else needs right now? And this one hurts a little bit. I'm going to be honest. It's the hardest one because it requires you to separate your own clarity from somebody else's needs. Forrest needed security, and that was real and it wasn't wrong. But choosing the path that met his need wouldn't have been a choice that I was making for myself. It would have been performative. It would have been that version of me that was fitting into somebody else's situation because it felt like it was required in the moment. And doing that is not the same as choosing. So the seat that you are committing to has to be your choice, not an accommodation or a performance, but truly a choice. So before we wrap up this episode, I want to make this practical because I know some of you are sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, this sounds right, but I still have to do all the things. Like I can't just up and change what I'm doing right now. And I'll agree with you. You're right. For a while, you are probably going to have to stay the course and do the thing that you're currently doing. This is not the call to the great resignation by any means. But here's the thing that naming the seat can do for you. It'll help you start looking at the work with intention versus default. So if you look at your week and you can start to see which tasks are visionary and which tasks are integration, you can start to identify which ones light me up and which ones drain me. And then every time something comes across your to-do list, you can say, is this my seat or is this something that I can either drop or delegate down the line? And over the time, you're going to design your ideal seat. You're going to find ways to hand off the work that doesn't fit, whether formally or informally, and probably earlier than you would have otherwise. So when you can stop spending extra energy on work that doesn't belong in your lane, you protect your capacity for the things that are truly yours. And I know that is not a luxury for people with full teams. It's a decision that you have to start with now. This is something that you have the ability to make a decision in right now. And it truly starts with knowing which seat is yours. Rocket Fuel was written for established companies with 2 people ready to fill 2 seats. But the argument I'm making underneath it is one that I believe that every solopreneur or maxed out leader or highly capable person building something independently needs to spend a little time with. You were never designed to run both operating modes indefinitely. The person doing both jobs long-term at the cost of their own clarity isn't more capable than everybody else. They're just the person who hasn't named which job actually belongs to them. And naming it isn't a reward that you get once you've built long enough or done the work far enough. It's the foundation that everything gets built off of. So I'll link Rocket Fuel in the show notes as well, because I've come back to it again at multiple stages of life and building, and it lands differently every time I read it. And I would love to know, if you're a listener, go ahead and take that free crystallizer assessment and tell me where you land on it. Because I love to find my people who score similarly. Each of us brings something unique to the table, which is why we have to have these conversations. Now, I appreciate the time that people spend listening to this podcast, and I want to say thank you. Remember, last week I told you you're not scattered, you're mislabeled. And this week is just a reminder that you don't have to do it all. So when you can name things and have clarity on them and know which things belong to you, it gives you that permission to start building with purpose. That's it for this week. Although before I let you go, I do want to say one thing. And it's probably something that most people don't realize based on conversations I've recently had. Shows like this one aren't ranked on number of listens. They're actually ranked on follows, downloads, and reviews. So if something I've said in any episode has landed for you, I would honestly appreciate it if you'd take just a split second to follow the show, leave a review or subscribe, download an episode, or set it up as an auto download if you can. Any of those things helps me serve others and get this message out there a little bit more. And I'd be genuinely grateful for it. And if you, like I said, take that assessment or want to let me know what you're thinking or feeling, or you need to hear next, you know where to find me. I'm the Jess Weber on all major platforms, and you can find me at bigideasmadesimple.com. Thanks, and see you next week.